The aims of this presentation are to help you prepare to undertake the GCSE Music Listening exam and to be able to achieve your best. By the end of this session, you should be aware of the structure of the exam, the three main areas which the questions will focus on, the types of questions you can expect, and how you can best avoid making common errors. During this presentation, you will need to refer to Appendix C of the specification, the list of musical terms. Don't look at it yet, just have it within reach. The GCSE Music exam is a listening and appraising test. It is worth 40% of the total marks for GCSE Music. There are 8 questions, 2 on each area of study. The areas of study are always in the same order, with the set works covered in question 1 and question 7. The title of the exam is Component 3, Appraising. The exam lasts for approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. The actual time depends on the length of the extracts of music which you will hear for each question. Each extract is chosen because appropriate questions can be asked, rather than just because it is a particular length. There is no need to check the clock in the exam room, as you will be guided through the exam by the recording. The invigilator will play the first CD to start the exam, and at the appropriate time swap to the second CD. They are not allowed to pause or replay anything. The CD begins with spoken instructions. If the volume is not right for you, you should put up your hand and inform the invigilator straight away. As you can see, each of the 8 questions is worth 12 marks. At the bottom of the front cover is a set of instructions and some information. It is a good idea to read these during the time before the examination starts. This can help you to focus yourself and get ready to do the best you can. The important things to note are that you should write your answers in black ink with no use of correction fluid or tape. If you make a mistake, you should cross it out and write the correct answer so that it is clear to the examiner. You are allowed to use pencil for writing musical notation. There are no optional questions. You should answer everything. Questions 1 and 7 will always be on the set works. You will have studied these pieces in class, so will probably be able to answer some, if not all, of the questions without even hearing the music. Before the music is heard, there will be a silence for you to read the question and look at the score if there is one provided. During this time, scan through the questions, underline any important keywords and note any questions that you do need to hear the music to answer. As soon as you are ready to start putting down answers, start writing. Remember that in this exam you are allowed to write from the very start of the first CD until the very end of the second one, including while the music is playing. There will be more about preparing for the set works later on in this presentation. Throughout this paper, the questions will be testing 3 main things. Your understanding of the elements of music. Check if the question is asking about a specific element or is more general. Your understanding and use of musical language. Before the exam, practice using the words in Appendix C of the specification. Your understanding of the context of the music. This is the when, where, why, and who of the music. Often these 3 things are intertwined in a response. It is essential that you read the questions very carefully before trying to answer them. Many questions will focus on a specific element of music, which will be mentioned in the wording, as in the examples shown. The first one here is a multiple choice question requiring you to underline one answer. You obviously need to understand each of the terms given and be able to recognise which of them is occurring throughout the extract you hear. It is worth noting here that if you do not underline anything, you will definitely not get the mark. If you underline more than one answer, you will not get the mark. If you underline one, then change your mind, cross out the wrong underlining and underline the answer you wish to give. Make it as clear as possible. Some candidates write "this one" above the answer if they've made crossings out on a multiple choice question. This is fine, but not necessary if it is clear which answer you wish to give. The second question is asking for a more detailed description of the elements specified, with 2 marks for each part question. This question asks how the particular elements are used in the extract. Note the use of the word "and", which means that to get all of the marks, you must refer to all of the elements. There are no marks here for writing about other elements of music. Think about what words could possibly be used here. On a piece of paper, write down as many words as you can which relate to tonality, harmony, and texture. We will look at instrumentation separately. Give yourself 3 minutes to make your list. Pause the presentation and then, when you're ready, compare your list of words with the items in Appendix C. Returning to the previous question, now let's focus on the instrumentation aspect. When the question paper is written, a panel of senior examiners and experienced teachers look at it and discuss whether every question is clear enough to direct you to give the answers in the marking scheme. This is why you often find things like you see here in brackets. Do not simply list instruments. This is important advice. If for this part of the question you write violins, piano and flute, you are simply listing instruments and will not receive any marks for this response. It is important to refer back to the question, which asks you to describe how instrumentation is used. The 3 statements at the bottom of the slide are all describing how the instruments are used. There are references to specific instruments or sections of the orchestra, as well as a brief description of their role in the music. Note that full sentences are not required as long as the meaning is clear. In order to be ready to answer questions relating to elements of music, your best form of revision is to practice listening regularly. You can do this formally, in other words, decide that you are now going to listen to a certain piece of music and reflect upon its use of elements, maybe using a set of questions to help you. But you can also do it informally. Anytime you hear some music, on the radio, on a TV programme or advert, in a film or a game, even coming from a neighbour's window or something someone else in your household is listening to, you can still ask yourself about the elements of music. What are the instruments? How are they being used? What type of texture is being used? How is the melody shaped? Is it in a major or a minor key or something else? Do things change during the piece? For example, does it start quietly, but the dynamics change gradually, or maybe suddenly? It is important to use the correct terms in your descriptions. Some people prefer to talk out loud to themselves, another person, their pet dog, or whatever, but others like to write things down. It is a good idea to practice writing your ideas down sometimes, so consider keeping a listening journal. Clearly, to answer this 1-mark question, you need to know the definition of the term allegretto. The best preparation for this type of question is to practice using the terms in the list in Appendix C as often as possible. Remember that you also need to be able to use terms which are specific to the set works, but these will only be required in questions 1 and 7. Now let's look at the longer answer 10-mark question. Remember to read carefully any extra instructions for this type of question, given here as bullet points. If you give a descriptive answer with no reference to the elements of music, then you're not meeting the requirements of the question and will not score highly. Equally, if you do not make any reference to how the features within each element are used to convey the idea of, in this case, a chase scene, then again, you will limit your marks. Now we will have a look at the marking scheme for this question. This question is assessed using a banded mark scheme. This means that rather than the examiner awarding a mark for each point you make, the response is judged holistically by comparing it with the descriptions in this table. The longer answer question will always be marked using this type of marking scheme. It can be broken down into the quality of the overall explanation or description of the musical features, perceptive, generally secure, inconsistent, limited, or very limited. The quality of the judgments made about how these features relate to the action or story as given in the question. Critical judgments, general judgments, some judgments, relevant judgments, insufficient judgments. And the use of specialist vocabulary as highlighted on the slide. Also included in language is being able to read and write music in the treble and bass clef. You need to work on several aspects which are all listed in the specification and summarised here. Reading and writing pitches in music with up to 4 sharps or flats in the key signature in both major and minor keys. Reading and writing rhythms in simple time and reading rhythms in compound time. Chord symbols, both contemporary symbols like G7, but also Roman numerals such as a V for chord 5. In the set works questions, there could be other details of the score that you must understand. For example, the alto clef of the Ola part in question 1. Questions could include identifying the correct rhythm or pitch heard in a piece of music from a multiple choice selection, identifying chords and chord progressions including cadences, understanding symbols on the score such as performance techniques, articulation and dynamic markings. There will also be a dictation question. You'll never be asked to write the rhythm and pitch at the same time, only one or the other, and it could be music in the treble or bass clef, always in simple time. Under the current specification, each note you write is assessed individually rather than relative to the previous note. So if the pitches should be C, D, E, and you write D, E, F, you will not get any marks as all 3 notes are wrong, even though the shape of the melody is correct. The only way to prepare for dictation is to train your ears by practicing. One way to start is to use your instrument to try to play any tunes you hear, before you then move on to trying to do this in your head and writing them down, and then playing them to check if they're right. The third area on which questions could focus is context. The context of the music is the detail of when and where it was composed, by whom, and for what purpose. Was it music for dance, music to tell a story, to accompany a play or film, or something else? For the 2 set works, you should know these details. The question shown here relates to a set work. For the other extracts in the exam, you may be asked to use the musical evidence to suggest context. We've already seen a question in this presentation which involved the context of the music. Here it is again on the slide. The best way to practice for this type of question is to use questions like this as a template, but swap the words shown in red as appropriate. Some examples of music you could use are shown here. You could choose music from a different type of film scene, a piece of program music written to describe something, music from a ballet, opera or musical which tells the story, or a song with lyrics where the meaning of those words is supported by features of the music. Before you get to the point of sitting in an exam, you and your teacher will want to have prepared well. This slide shows the kind of things you should know about each set work. It is not an exhaustive list, so please consider these as examples of what to cover. As we have already seen, the questions in this exam focus on elements, language, and context. So for the set works, it is important that you consider the pieces under each of the elements of music. You should know the form of the music and be able to recognize the different sections. A good way to internalize this is by singing or playing the pieces. You should memorize some facts about the pieces, the key, any important chord sequences or cadences, any interesting chords or use of harmony, the way rhythms are used, and how the melody is shaped. At its most basic, is it conjunct or disjunct? You also need to be aware of the relevant language for the pieces. This means the specific terms, but also includes being able to follow and interpret the score. If there are any terms which are specific to the set works or additional score features which are not covered in Appendix C, you need to know these as well, but they can only be tested in the set works questions. An example of this is the alto clef used for viola parts. Finally, you should know a little of the context of the piece. Who was it written by? When? Was it written for a specific person or place? Does it have a particular meaning? There are some elements of exam technique you need to be aware of. Here are the general points. Always answer the question which is actually being asked. A correct answer to a different question will not be credited. So, for example, if you are asked which instrument is playing, if you write semiquaver rhythms, then your answer will not get the mark, even if there is a semiquaver rhythm. The answer in this case must be the name of an instrument. If you are asked to identify a cadence and you write trumpet, you will not get a mark, even if there is a trumpet playing. The answer must be the name of a type of cadence. Remember that there are no optional questions in this exam. Answer everything on the paper. If you don't know the answer, put something sensible. Going back to the example we just had, if the question asks you to name a cadence, then the answer can only be perfect, imperfect, plagal, or interrupted. For a multiple choice question, you must only give one answer unless the question says otherwise. If you mark more than the required number of answers, you will not get a mark, even if one of the answers you give is correct. Remember to use correct terminology at all times. Avoid nonsense statements such as the pitch gets faster. There are no marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar in this paper. In a comparison question such as this, you need to give matching pairs of descriptions. The highlighted lines are for you to give your first comparison. The paper is set out like this so that you don't have to waste time writing 4 sentences in the form, the first extract is one thing, but the second extract is another thing. You can put a word or short phrase on the lines to save time. Note that this example is asking for any 4 differences between the extracts. In the exam, the question could ask for differences related to certain elements of music. Let's have a look at some possible answers. Remember, we don't have any music to refer to at the moment. We're just looking at the technique for answering this style of question. Here are some examples of answers. The first pair of answers both relate to tempo. The first extract is fast throughout, but the second gets slower. This is a comparison, so as long as it's actually correct, it will be awarded a mark. The second and third pairs of answers do not match, so would not attract any marks, even if the individual observations about the extracts were correct. In other words, it may be true that the first extract was loud and the second had a polyphonic texture, but because these are to do with different elements of music, they do not form a comparison, which is the deeper skill that this question is looking for. If the highlighted answers were swapped over, answers 2 and 3 would contain matching pairs, and this response would potentially score full marks. The final pair of answers compares instrumentation, so if correct, would be awarded a mark. Sometimes, to explain yourself fully, you need to locate your answers, particularly if you want to talk about something which doesn't happen all the way through a piece of music. Here are the common ways to explain which bit of the music you're talking about. If there is a printed score in the exam paper, you can use the bar numbers. They are usually printed at the start of each line, so you can count on to the bar you want. If it is a set work, you can give the section of the piece. For example, in the introduction, verse 1, chorus, or in section A, section B, or in the coda. If there are lyrics, you can refer to these. For example, when the singer sings the word you. If the lyrics are printed in the exam paper, you could say, in line 4 of the lyrics. In an unfamiliar piece, you can simply describe it as at the beginning, in the middle, or near the end. Otherwise, you can use other things you can hear to describe the location, such as when the violins start to play, or when the singer stops. Some final advice which applies to every question. You will hear each extract more than once. Maintain your concentration and listen each time as if it is the first time, so you're really focused. Give only the required answers. Don't waste time writing about things which are not relevant to the question. Read carefully and underline or highlight words you need to focus on. For example, which elements of music you are asked to describe. Make your answers clear. This applies to handwriting, but also to the dictation question when you must make sure you are absolutely clear. Place note heads carefully on one line or in one space. Colour in neatly any note heads which should be coloured. And do not leave anything blank.